Okay, I guess they are going to start us off with no bells. But welcome back. Hope you all had a nice and joyful break. Reminder that before we went on break, we were working on sections 3.3 and 3.4. So section 3.3 was mostly about change of base, again, expanding and condensing logarithms. And then 3.4 was all about solving equations. So before break, one of the assignments you guys did was worksheet number 1, which was basically a practice quiz, give you an idea of what you should expect for this. And we did modify our plan a little bit here. It's going to drag it out a little bit. So we will still quiz over this next class, but it's not going to be the test. So remember, we still have a 50-point test over these two sections. So we're going to actually quiz on them first, then we'll review and test on it. So again, I know it's been quite a while here. So hopefully you guys took some of my advice about marking up your book assignment and your first practice quiz with your mistakes you were making so that you had something quick to look back at. So on our agenda there, number 3, I listed out some of the things I would suggest that you look back over, and I put them, well, I don't know, not really in any order, but 3.3, you needed a reminder on expanding and condensing notes. The book assignment, I have not had you turn that one in yet, so I will be collecting that next class. You might look over and see if there's common mistakes you had there. 3.4 is where we talked about how to solve equations, and handout or assignment number 95 was the long book assignment, so that should be already turned in, but a good resource for you to see where you were before break. And then finally the practice quiz 1, and then that moves us into the other assignment with this, which is the practice quiz 2. So that was the handout y'all should have picked up this morning, so that should be number 97. If you would please number it. And I'd like to go ahead and break this into 2 sections. I'd like to go over all of this with you again since it's been the break and you're probably a little bit rustier than you were before. But go ahead and number it as 97, and then go ahead and work out at least the first, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Try the first 6. The first 6 questions shouldn't take an extremely long time. So we just get some quick feedback there. And then I'll go over all of those 6, give you time to try the 6 solving equations, and then we can go over all of those too. And for right now, at least, please treat these questions as a real practice quiz. You don't need to get out your notes. If you don't feel confident on a question, do what you think you could. Just like if it was a real quiz and you were trying to get some partial credit.
All right.
Was that long enough for the first couple? First 6? Okay. Then let's go ahead and go over those 6. And obviously you should be marking up and circling the questions that you didn't remember how to do so that you know what to study here. Okay, but change of base is part of section 3.3. And mostly this is used as a way to type stuff in your calculator. Like if you wanted to graph this in your calculator to remember what it looks like and you don't know how to tell your calculator base 5, you can either do base 10, which is programmed in your calculator, or you could do base E, which is programmed in your calculator. Either one of those would be fine. However, honestly don't remember, but if it's multiple choice, we may only list it like this or we may only list it like that, so you need to be aware that both of those are correct. Okay, any questions about number 1? Okay, number 2, to expand this, so we've got a log base b of some stuff, and so we're going to expand this into multiple log base b's. But this is going to take a couple steps. So the first thing you should have done is taken this square root and written it as an exponent, because anytime you have an exponent on something you're taking the log of, you would like to bring that down out front. So that's more or less trying to get it in the correct form, try to make it look correct. And then to expand, there's only 2 ways to expand. Multiplication expands into addition, division expands into subtraction. So I have this 1/2, and I have a log base b of x minus a log base b of y. And then the last thing that you need to be careful about is that this 1/2 was times all of this. So you either need to put a 1/2 here like you're distributing it, or put parentheses. The 1/2 isn't just on the first part of the expansion. It's still over the whole thing. Okay, going the other direction to condense. So that's the exact opposite of expanding. So I'm going to do question 4 first, because this is kind of undoing what we did in question 2. These are both log base 3. So we can condense them into a single log base 3. But subtraction condenses into division. And in this case, 54 divided by 9 would be 6. Guess we might as well write that. Now be careful not to say that this is 2. This doesn't equal 2. Remember, this is 3 to what power gives you 6. So we can't do anything else with that. So division can expand to subtraction. Subtraction can condense to division. It's the same thing, opposite directions, so opposite operation. And then the only other way to expand is multiplication expands into addition. So condensing, addition condenses into multiplication. But on this one, you really should have brought up the 5 and the 3 first. You really need those up out of the way. And then they're both log base 3, or log base 2. And you've got an 8 to the 5th. And then it's going to be times b to the 3rd. Because of this addition, it's going to condense into multiplication. Okay, let me work the next 2 since they're also expanding and condensing. And then I'll pause for questions. Okay, I think there was one just like this on practice quiz 1, worksheet 1, that you guys did before the break, but it was multiple choice. So division should have expanded into subtraction. But on this particular question, what makes this one a little bit harder is this expands more too. This is multiply, which would expand as addition. You also need to bring these exponents down when you go this direction. And then the easiest thing to overlook is what I did right here. When I expanded this, this was supposed to be minus all of this stuff. So when you expand it, it's still supposed to be minus all of that stuff. So you can either have parentheses like this, or you can distribute the negative and make both of these subtract. Now remember, I know some of the book assignments were kind of long, so you probably didn't do this on a regular basis. But on a quiz, if you got this answer and you don't feel 100% sure about it, you should try to condense this and see if you end up with what you started with. Because if this doesn't condense to that, then this can't be correct. And you would at least know to try again. Okay, and then one more condense. So again, all of this stuff is really from 333, yeah, just 3-3. Change of base and expanding and condensing. So to condense this, I probably want to get this 3 up out of the way and the 2 up out of the way. And then subtraction condenses to division. And this is what these directions mean. Condense to a logarithm of a single quantity. So your answer should be log of some stuff. You shouldn't have the number out front. You shouldn't have multiple logs. You should have a single logarithm of some stuff, of a quantity. Now, I guess if you forgot that stuff over the break, that's actually a fairly easy one to get caught up, since there's only 2 ways to expand and 2 ways to condense. But from questions 2 through 6, any questions you guys would like to ask, any clarification you would like before we move on to the second half? You remember that okay? Okay. Okay, then the last 6 are solving equations, which I think is harder because it's got to pull out more tools than just 2 ways to expand and 2 ways to condense. So I will certainly give you a bigger chunk of time, but I do want you to try all of these. Again, please don't use your notes. Just see where you're at, an honest assessment of where you're at. And we'll go over all 6 of these because we've got plenty of time today. So try them. If you're not sure how to do one, at least do what you can. And then hopefully this helps you identify a few things you need to review. 3 more minutes to try to get caught up here. Looks like most people are finishing up. Let's see how you did. Now remember, one thing to keep in mind here is that sometimes there is slightly different ways to do your work, and you could still have a correct answer that looks different than mine. So if that ends up being the case, I'll remind you at the end of this how you can check with your calculator to make sure that yours is also okay. Now, what I'd actually like to do for each of these 6 questions, other than just work them out with you, is maybe just do like the first step of each one of these 2, because starting these questions is certainly one of the hardest things to do. So it's kind of good for us to review what some of those first strategies were. So I'll come back to number 7. I think that one's one of the more unusual ones. But in number 8, you could have started off by subtracting 12 from both sides and dividing both sides by 2. That didn't involve any logarithms yet. And number 9, you could have multiplied both sides by 1 plus e to the negative x. And then maybe distributed the 2. And you could have subtracted a 2. And you could have divided a 2. There's a lot of steps that you could have done that still didn't involve logarithms yet. Again, we'll come back and finish it. But the reason why I knew to multiply both sides by 1 plus e to the negative x is because this is better to me because it doesn't have fractions. Obviously, having fractions in an equation is kind of a problem. So, in question 10, I've got 2 logs of the same type separated with subtraction. So the key there, really the first thing you had to do was condense with multiplication. or I'm sorry, not multiplication, division. Subtraction condenses into division. You could have at least done that before you had to get into more logarithm stuff. So expanding and condensing is good for a couple of questions, but honestly it's really mainly for solving equations, so I'd be surprised if you did not have one of these on your quiz and one of those on your test. And then number 11, you could have at least divided both sides by 4. So I've done very, very, very little logarithm properties yet. However, if you got stuck at the start of any one of those questions, then that's something that you need to make note of. Okay, now let's go back to number 8 and let's start to finish these up, because these have a lot of kind of patterns to them. Now that I've done as much as I could do without logarithms except condensing. And number 8, this is called exponential form. We could rewrite this in logarithmic form if we know which two things to switch around. This is optional, but instead of saying log base e, most people are going to say natural log, and then the last step was to divide by 2. So if you have an answer equivalent to that, that's okay. But if yours doesn't look like that, then you need to check it here at the end to be sure that it's alright. So I undid adding, undid multiplying. I switched from exponential form to logarithmic form, and then undid multiplying with dividing. Number 9 has got basically the same steps. It needs to switch the forms. Now you don't have to do this, but in my experience you guys do a better job of switching the forms if you put this on the left and then just the constant on the right. But this is exponential form. This would be its logarithmic form. Just like the last question, log base e just means natural log. That's optional. I'm not going to take off points if you don't do that. And then undo times with divide. So very similar finish between question 8 and 9. Switch the forms. I'm going to put a color star there again. And then undo multiplication. Number 10. So third question in a row, switch the forms. This one just happens to be in logarithmic form. But to make the log go away so that it's an exponential form, these two need to switch places. So you should have been left with something like that. Now this one just takes a tiny bit more work. Multiply both sides by x. Take away an x from both sides, and then you can undo times with divide. Looks like 1/24. So once again, third question in a row, switching from whatever form it's in to the other form, kind of make things fall into place. Okay, question 11 is going to make 4 questions in a row. Now, if natural log bugs you, remember that just means log base e, so you're welcome to just squeeze in an extra step there to see where the e's coming from. But this is logarithmic form. If I switch the form, it's going to look like this, and then undo times with divide. By far the worst thing that you could possibly do on these questions is forget to try to switch the form. That is the key in almost every one of these. And number 12, I didn't start number 12 because if you know to switch the form, then you're pretty much done. Again, natural log means log base e, so if you feel more comfortable writing it like this, then do that. Switch the forms, so this would now say e squared is 2x plus 3. Undo a plus with a minus, and undo a times 2 with a divide 2. So again, these would be the most common answers. We'll still go back and do question 7 too, but 7 just has some that's not as repetitive as these. But 5 of the 6, switching from exponential to logarithmic or logarithmic to exponential. That needs to be at the top of your brain of things to consider doing. Now, just because this is the way I made my answers look, again, depending on how you work some of these, your answers can look different and they can still be correct. So, I would be happy to help you with those and help you see if yours are also correct, but first you need to do this. So, our quiz and I believe our test will also be no calculator, so you can't rely on this on the test. But if you get an answer, and especially if it's something that looks a little bit unusual, like e squared minus 3 over 2, especially in your practice, you should probably store that in for a variable and then make sure that it makes the original equation true. It's supposed to be natural log of 2x plus 3 is supposed to equal 2. And so if this doesn't equal 2, I know that I have a mistake. So if you have an answer that looks different than e squared minus 3 over 2, but yours still makes it equal to, then you would still get full credit. So I will have to do all that work when it's time to grade your quizzes and tests. Now, number 7, going back to this one, I just don't like this one first, but if we think about what we did on these other questions, one time I condensed. That doesn't look like it helps here. Many times I switch the forms. This doesn't fit exponential form. It's not quite exponential form. So I can't do that. It's not logarithmic form. There's no log. I can't do undo, add, subtract, multiply, or divide yet. So one of the rarest tools, but you do need it sometimes, is to take the log of both sides, or the natural log of both sides, whichever you prefer. Because then we get to use the property of logarithms where the exponents can come down out front. And it's not necessarily an easy equation to solve after that, but at least the logarithm stuff is over now. We've got some log in our work, but we don't need any more log properties. So to get rid of these parentheses, we could distribute this number. Natural log of 2 is just a number. If I want to solve for x, I need to get all the x's on one side, so I'll subtract this over. And then even though these are like terms, they're both x's. In my head, I can't tell you what natural log of 3 minus natural log of 2 is. But what you can do is you can say, this guy has an x, this guy has an x. Let me factor out that GCF. And then finally, you can finish undo times with divide. So, not the most common, but taking the log of both sides is sometimes necessary. So if nothing else works, that's something that you could try to do. Now, if instead of taking the natural log of both sides, you took the common log of both sides, base 10, then your answer is going to look a little bit different here. I think these natural logs will just be common logs, I'm not sure. But again, you're welcome to store it in your calculator. And if it makes the left side and the right side equal the same thing, then it would be safe. So hopefully that helped you identify a few things that you maybe have forgotten over the break. But all of this would be fair game and likely to be on our quiz next class. So anything that jumps out at you immediately? Any questions you guys have? Any of it you want me to go back over again? Okay, a couple things to finish up then. Again, we got a pretty light class here, but of course any of these questions you had trouble starting, or you had any mistakes that weren't just careless arithmetic mistakes, please do yourself a favor and highlight those questions somehow, circle them, something, so that you got something that you could quickly look back at and study and it be efficient. Also, if you had different answers and you think yours are correct, try storing it in the calculator, see if it works. If it doesn't work and you don't see what's wrong with your work, then please bring it up here and let me help you to get that cleared up. And finally, here's a list of all of the things, all the different resources we had before the break that would be worth looking over depending on what you were struggling with. So handout 92 and 93 is where we talked about reviewed change of base and expanding and condensing. 93 is where you practice some of it. That will be taken up next class. Actually, I'll just open that up in Google Classroom in a minute, so some of y'all can turn it in early if you want to. 94 is where we just moved into 3.4 and solving equations, and we kind of took it one step at a time. So if that seems overwhelming to you, you forgot too much of it over the break, then you might want to review that. 95 was the long book assignment, and if you marked up the questions and the mistakes you made, then that should be a very useful document. And then finally the practice quiz we did before the break, 96, and then the practice quiz we just did today. But next class will be the quiz. So I don't remember how many points it is, like 20, 25 points I think. So that will be a little bit less pressure. Then we will review a day, and then we will test this exact same content, and then that will be a 50 point in the major category. So that will matter much more to your grade. So in the end, it's the same content, so I would think you'd want to be prepared to do well for your quiz and then not need to review much for your test, but that's our plan. Okay. Any questions about the directions for the rest of class? Okay, just let me know how I can help.